Hello and welcome to A Theory of Everything. I'm Luis Razo, the director of ASIM and host of this channel. Today we have a return visit from Professor Adrian Bejan, the J.A. Jones Distinguished Professor of Mechanical Engineering at Duke University. I've already explained why I think Professor Bejan's work is important in the introduction to our first exchange. So I'm not going to repeat myself here. Let me just say that his attempt to connect physics to everything that matters to humans is, in my opinion, one of the most important questions on the modern scene and one of the central concerns of our work at ASIM. Today, we're going to talk about his most recent book, Time and Beauty, Why Time Flies and Beauty Never Dies. If we get a chance, we're also going to talk about or try to connect Bejan's ideas and to understand what's happening in Ukraine. So in terms of accolades, I think it's noteworthy that Professor Bejan ranks among the top 0.01% of the most cited and impactful scientists. He's the author of 31, now 32 books, as well as almost 700 peer-referenced, peer-refereed articles. His H index is 101, and he has 79,000 citations on Google Scholar. He's received honorary doctorates from 18 universities in 11 different countries. He also received the Benjamin Franklin Medal in 2018 and the Humboldt Research Award in 2019. Professor Bejan, thank you so much for your return visit.
Thank you for not forgetting me. I'm delighted to be back.
Well, we have so much to talk about and so little time. I had a great time reading your book. I felt a wonderful connection to you as a person and to some of your main concerns and to your development of your ideas throughout your very illustrious career and your incredible number of books. Would it be possible for you to give us a brief overview of what you think are the most important of your books and tell us where your latest book, Time and Beauty, which is a real beauty, where it fits into your overall scientific vision?
Okay, my answer is totally unoriginal. I cannot pick a most important book, meaning every single one at the time was the apogee of what led to it. The most important in the answer that I'm going to give you is that looking back, there's a single story or a single book yet to be written, which is about my own evolution as first as a student and then a professor and the author. And the name for that was free questioning, not allowing myself to become a cookie out of a cookie cutter. Basically, is like a driver on a highway that constantly with freedom adjusts his route, picking this path or this turn, whatever feels better or more intelligent on the spot. So that's basically how, in my own career, my research articles, and by the way, my books are not about other people's work. My books are a sequence of compendia of my own publications, and how, say, 5 years in a row, my most recent research articles have qualified themselves for a summary as a book. These books have progressed from my education at MIT, which was in the thermodynamics series, not BS, meaning a discipline with precise words and language and rules, and also a very clear promise, not too little and not too much, but very clear promise. The promise from thermodynamics is power, how to provide power for anything that moves, which of course needs power in order to move from the vehicle to the animal, for that matter. The animal is a truck, and Adrian is basically an animal. How is that? There's no when it comes to thermodynamics, there's just one design, one discipline. And that was the beginning. And it was a very healthy beginning, because it taught me that what I knew, which is really physics, applied physics, is universally applicable. It is impossible to refute, because you see, physics is a very thin book of laws, and everything in nature obeys the laws. That's why they are the laws.
I like this. This is something, I'm
yeah.
sorry, Professor, this is something that I often repeat. I think it's worth drawing attention to that fact again, that physics is ultimately at the foundation of everything. There's nothing outside of physics, as far as we know. That's a contention that I often make. So I appreciate the fact that your work is
Luis,
very,
that's right.
yes.
Luis, I also teach that words have meaning. Physics is came from British rewriters of science in the 1800s. They picked this Greek word, which is a physis in the Greek, which means the everything. That in our language, which is Latin-based, is called natura, and she is the one who gives birth to everything that is. Okay, and that is why physics is the big tent under which all these individuals who pretend to be scientists reside. They reside in cubicles. They are separated by short or tall walls, from say physics to sociology and biology. But everything that moves in the minds of those individuals obeys the laws of physics, whether they like it or not, you see. And I grew up with the peace of mind that what I knew was obvious or clear or settled. And that's why now I'm coming to the midpoint in my career in the mid-90s. It occurred to me that physics, in my case, thermodynamics, all this work was satisfying or proclaimed by the first law and second law of thermodynamics. Yet everything that I kept reading referred to so-called systems with boundaries. I had a training in art, so I know what boundaries are. You have to make a drawing. The thinner the pencil, the closer you are to the definition of boundary. Boundary is supposed to be a zero thickness surface that separates your object, the one that you pick to investigate, and the rest of the world, which is called the environment. And so it's about drawings. And the drawings in what I knew best, which was the evolution of technology, had been changing from one book to the next, or from one century to the next, like the screens on the celluloid, tape of an old movie. And in other words, the nature is not one image, like say the skeleton of the rat in the zoology book. It is in fact a movie, an evolutionary design, and it is in fact evolution, literally, accessible to each of us in our lifetime, meaning evolution, not a mystery, not the mystery that's being invoked in the biology, which is animal evolution lasted forever. You have to imagine what might have been. You have to guess, all that is not necessary for a person who looks at nature as a whole, meaning the bio, the non-bio, the social organization, and also, of course, the planetary organization, which is I have shown in accord with the constructal law that we'll be discussing next. It is predictable. It is predictable. It is evolutionary. It is multi-scale, much more precise. It is hierarchical, like everything else that crawls through the soil and migrates through the bush. Hierarchical. Yeah, that's right. Imbibed in inequality. That's nature.
Good, very good point. There's so much to unpack there. You mentioned the evolution of the planetary system as a kind of a segue into the constructal law, and yeah, it's kind of a segue into the constructal law. Can you say a little bit more about that? How the planets have evolved or plan?
Look, science. If you look at what is being taught, first of all, it is about us. So, starting with the oldest, which was geometry, how to measure the plot of land and not be swindled by the neighbor. That is about us. Everything else, mechanics, the sister science from the golden era of Greece, the same thing, was about enhancing the effect of a naked human power. All these things have an origin that is, in retrospect, timid and modest about the individual on the ground. And the laws, in fact, were formulated with this sort of language that was at the disposal. And then all of a sudden, in fact, this has been flavor of the day in physics. People are discussing the untouchable, which is the cosmos, its past and the future in nothing but metaphors, without trying to address obvious questions such as why are the celestial bodies not of one size? A very simple question. This is the first one that I posed because I knew the answer. And the answer is that, first of all, the primordial soup is a suspension of presumably bodies of small bodies of uniform size. They attract each other. Therefore, the suspension is in a volume in internal tension. Yeah, in tension. Like imagine a two-dimensional version of what I'm saying. The surface of a liquid facing air is covered by a film of in tension called surface tension. And naturally, the future of that, according to second law, is to relieve itself, meaning to relieve the tension by cracking. And okay, so the that in outer space, the relief to that tension happens when these small bodies coalesce together. They are attracted, they collide, and that's the end of the two. They become a bigger one, and locally, at least, the tension has decreased. And I showed that there are two ways in which to coalesce. One is to coalesce into a suspension of bigger bodies that is uniform in spacing and size of the bodies, and another suspension of bodies that are not uniform, with a few big ones and a few small ones. And I show that to reach the suspension that's hierarchical happens faster, that is with greater access than the easier to draw sketch of the suspension that with one size fits all. So we have a hierarchy in space as a manifestation of the constructal law, which is the universal, now I'm stating the constructal law, universal statement for all these things that have configuration, they flow or they move, and they have freedom to morph. How? In the direction of acquiring easier access to what flows. And in this statement, you can fit the celestial bodies. You can also fit the rainwater that wets the plain and becomes the Mississippi Basin. You can fit whatever you want, even the population of students who want to attend university. The answer to that universal tendency in the case of students or education, or okay, listeners to your own podcast, is configuration, evolutionary, different tomorrow or better tomorrow than today.
Okay, can I ask another common or recurring theme to the channel is the concept of interpretation in science and in physics specifically. So this concept of evolution according to flow and according to the constructal law, how does it compare with traditional interpretations, for example, of Darwinian evolution and Einsteinian gravity? Is it complementary? Is it another option? Is it, how do you see this?
Well, look, I come from a very modest background, and one lesson from my parents was to talk about what I know and not about what I don't know. I'm not qualified to dissect Darwin and Einstein, truly. What I do know is the meaning of the words. I come from a Romance language where evolution is a word that's from antiquity or even older. It means change after change, discernible, and changes are discernible in a direction which is called forward, or the future, or the passing of time. That's evolution, and I don't need any recent narrators to hijack the meaning of that word, frankly. And something else when it comes to creative work, because you asked me about my books. I'm not a very good reader, Luis. Time is so short. I feel much happier when I sit down and I write what occurs to me, or what occurs from my free-flowing conversation or correspondence with colleagues such as yourself and others. A few of them become my co-authors along the way. They're all over the globe in many languages and continents, and they're not a different culture in the sense that they seem to belong to this group of individuals who look around. I mean, who walk through life with their eyes open and are not afraid to ask questions. I like them, and they like me.
Excellent. Well, for whatever it's worth, I think I see elements and traces of the constructal law and your ideas about flow and energy and freedom. I think it's a different perspective of basically the same fundamental physics at work. Your work is more ambitious in the sense that It applies to a wider range of things in life, such as the way rivers flow, or the way an airplane is designed, the way animals move, and of course, something that I hope we can get into later if we have time, the way even power moves through banking and lending and the entrepreneurship of society. I think all of these ideas are really super interesting, very ambitious, but super relevant, and I think it's super interesting. So go ahead.
Well, let me respond right away. It's yeah, one way to describe the attitude coming from my field is that it covers a broader territory. Yes, but I think the better word is that it unites. It unites. There is
Sure.
a tremendous advance in this field, tremendous advance in this other, and maybe 10 more other fields. However, when the amateur, and I'm that person, walks into this menagerie from the outside, it is usually the amateur that sees the forest from the trees, the unifying view, or the big tent. It happened incidentally in my discipline of origin, which is thermodynamics. This is a relatively young discipline, only 150 years old. Before that, there was mechanics, I mentioned that, from the old Greeks, and caloric theory. This was 300 years ago in Europe, having the idea that when you heat a bottle full of water, you can then retrieve the same heat from the warm water in the cold bed at night. It was a very useful idea, which accounted for the fact that thermal, quote unquote, phenomena are everywhere. And of course, on the other side of the fence, mechanical phenomena were everywhere. Mechanical really means contrivance, such as not only the contrivances made by people, but the muscle and bone action in animals, which look a lot like the contrivances that people make to lift things with. And so the aha, which began with Sadi Carnot in the 1820s, was that these totally different realms of knowledge, successful in its own right, every single one, were in fact manifestation of a single principle. It was basically the combination of first law and second law as they came out to be. That was the view from the amateur who came from the outside into a room of literati who was already full of fame and epaulets and members of the academy. He was truly an outsider. He was a mechanical engineer. He was actually a military mechanical engineer. And a lot of the early science that we teach today in the name of applied mathematics came from these people, meaning from officers who were basically inventing applied mathematics for the purpose of designing bridges, fortresses, roads, ramparts, aqueducts, and viaducts. So that's basically and of course, catapults and all sorts of things. And you see, seen from above, the activity of the wise is unifying. Seen from above, it is to see it better, in my opinion, the few who reside in this high balcony would benefit from having or rubbing elbows with a few more polymaths as opposed to with specialists. You see,
Well, I really like that idea of unity and unifying and being cross-disciplinary, which for many complicated reasons, I suppose, modern academia frowns upon, no, the cross-disciplinary approach. Well, certain elements of academia frown upon that cross-disciplinary approach, but the unification, I think, in fact, you mentioned a theory of everything in your book very quickly. And I think what your ideas are moving toward is that theory of everything, not in the limited sense in which it's used in physics of uniting general relativity and quantum mechanics, because that's not really a theory of everything. Even if we manage to unite these two different realms of physics, it's only a theory of physics and not a theory of the whole of existence or the whole of human evolution, which is entirely different. So this impulse of yours to unify, I think, is very, very beautiful and deserves commendation.
Impulse, yeah, a good word, impulse. I don't know what to call it. It's just an urge that comes from being curious and free to express myself. But I never paid any attention to this so-called theory of everything. Again, because I teach the meaning of the words. What is that everything that do people mean when they say the theory of everything? Well, everything is nature, okay? And nature. I already went through that. What physics? That is the everything. And then theory. Yeah, I'll ask these people, what do you predict with the so-called theory? What do you predict about the everything with the theory? What is that? I am completely uneducated on what the answer is because I have not heard it. What about it now? If I take that slogan, the theory of everything, seriously, I know that everything means nature, and nature is actually observable. It has configuration. I've already established that the configuration is evolving. In other words, it has evolution or evolutionary design. And yes, today, through my work and the work of others, there is a law with which to predict the said evolution. That's basically in my view, the Gordian knot that has just been cut.
Mm-hmm. And that's the constructal law.
That is the constructal law, and the record of it is again beginnings were modest, and the opposite of what we're discussing today. They had to do with evolutionary design in my work at the time, which was about architectures for cooling packages of electronics. But truth be told, that was the work I was doing, but I knew that the implications were general. So the very first journal article that I published on this idea was about the evolution of human movement in the city. Okay, that is how I published it, and so I published it in June 1996. I called it Street Network Theory of Evolution in Nature. How about that? Meaning,
very interesting.
all of nature is the city or a city, and all these bodies are like the people in the city. So you see, I was okay telling a joke if you want, but I felt the urge to express it in a way that announced the arrival of an idea that is not really stuck in engineering. And then what happened after that was more of the first kind, which was to show how with the constructal law I can predict, for example, animal locomotion, animal respiration, animal heart beating. These are observations very well documented in physiology, but never predicted, and even less predicted from a single idea. And many other things that led to what you mentioned, which was to do the same predicting exercise in with regard to human-made vehicles such as airplanes and helicopters, most recently boats with sails. If you are surprised to hear that, then try to ask yourself, why do boats with sails look the same from the tall ships of Napoleon's navy to the toy that your child plays with in the bathtub? They all look the same. They're as tall as the hull is long. Yeah, there's a reason for that, and that reason is the tendency for the thing to flow the fastest when the wind blows, as opposed to being a very tall ship or a very short mast. All right, there's so I gave you it's like the comedian having to explain the joke. Not good.
Professor, these are all very interesting lines of thinking. I would like to, because time is slipping here, I would like to turn now to the main book, Time and Beauty. Can you tell us, one of the central ideas is that this universal experience of time passing more quickly as we age. Can you give us a review or a quick summary of why this happens?
Yeah, this is my most recent book, for the general audience. It is really about the fact that human perceptions, which traditionally in science at least are treated as intangibles, meaning not the subject of laws of physics, meaning they're not predictable and not measurable and all these other things. Human perceptions happen, meaning to the individual, because of the design of this animal mover, the individual. And that design has been through locomotion and other things, such as sensory organs, in the direction of facilitating the movement of the body, the safety of the body, the longevity of the moving body. So that is the constructal law of all animal design. You can call it the survival if you want, but survival is meek in comparison with what I outlined. There's performance along the way, and that others would call it achievement, and features worth emulating by the observers. All right, so two perceptions that are obviously different, namely the perception of time and the perception of beauty. I figured out that they are in fact the same physics phenomenon and mechanism in the design of the human body. They both come from the fact that we perceive the environment through, I'm talking about visual perception, intermittently. The eyes are moving in abrupt jolts called saccade. In other words, you can, metaphor, imagine that the vision is like a a camera that clicks and clicks and clicks and records still images, one different than the previous one. In other words, the vision is about recording changes in the configuration. And when changes are perceived, they are of course communicated to the brain. That is, let's call it the storage facility for these perceptions. And so the brain perceives changes, not a continuity of images. And that's basically the mechanism. Now, time is the perception of change. And in the infancy, these jolts, the saccade of the eyes of the baby are extremely frequent. You can do this by looking in the eyes of an infant in the crib. And so the brain is trained from infancy to expect a high number of these clicks. Now, with aging, which of course is preceded by the growth of the body into adulthood, the path of transmission from eye to brain increases because all length scales of the body increase over time. So the distance for signal to travel increases. And throughout life until death, the speed of any flow through the body decreases because of degradation and the increase in complexity of the paths. Plus, there's another aspect with age, the frequency of all muscle-actuated action decreases. So these changes have the effect of increasing the time between successive clicks. So at the end of the day, in old age, the brain has the impression that the sunset arrived too soon. All right, the brain was used to having seen more interesting stuff before the night fell. So that's the source of the perception that time flies, or that wow, it's Christmas already, or I had no idea where my life went, when you reach your 60s and 70s. Okay, so that's the perception of time, the time speeding up.
So to summarize, is it basically that the body and specifically the eyes slow down in terms of how quickly they perceive the environment, and because of that slowing down?
The eye, that was the last thing I said. The eye, the movement of the eyes slows down because big eyes, just like the big legs of big elephants, are moving less frequently. Tiny muscles and tiny bones are moving with higher frequency. But that is just one of the many reasons which I listed why the interval between the successive clicks increases as we grow and as we age. Okay, so
perfect. Thank you. Now, now beauty. Why?
I'll get to
what's
that.
the connection? Yeah, beauty and why different people have different conceptions of beauty.
No. Before we talk about different people,
okay.
I'm talking about all of us. In fact, I'm willing to stick my hand in the fire as to why what I'm going to say is true. The same mechanism of vision comes through, in our case, two eyes that are aligned on the horizontal. And the two eyes are scanning the image. The image is flat because the world is flat, okay? And because there are two eyes, the effective speed of scanning horizontally is 50% greater than the speed of scanning vertically. the reason for this is that when the left eye is finished scanning, the right eye takes over and continues the scan during the same click. You see, so the effective speed, meaning the distance is now longer during the same time step, is the speed is greater than scanning during the same time interval vertically. And it turns out that of all the let's call them rectangular images in the world, some tall, some squat, the image that's scanned the fastest, meaning the best two-dimensional scanner, is the one that's looking at an image just like your computer screen right now, 50% longer on the horizontal than on the vertical. This is the image that everybody likes. The evidence is clear. Everybody uses business cards shaped this way. Obviously, computer screens, credit cards, and oh, you talk about other cultures. The flags of all nations, with only two exceptions, are shaped this way. The white flag, for those who want to avoid being killed by bombing, is shaped the same way. You have and slogans and all these things. You look at any piece of propaganda art. It has this feature, including all these things on my wall behind my head. If you go into an art gallery, most of the paintings from the best artists are shaped this way. The facades of buildings are shaped this way. Never mind. Okay, the evidence is overwhelming in support of the conclusion that people unwittingly like some shapes and do not like other shapes. By the way, banknotes, if I mentioned that, are also shaped this way. Tickets of all kinds, airplane and theater, are shaped this way. There are exceptions, of course, but that's not the point. The point is that the observer unwittingly goes for what helps perceive, understand, retain, and get out of the face of danger.
Okay, excellent.
And by the way, if you know this particular secret, then you see the evolution of so-called quality in things people buy. Not only clothing or design on the clothing or pattern on clothing, but also the shapes of automobiles, the shapes of you name it, table coverings in say first class on the airplane. There's a out of every single designer comes a statement that in that person the difference between beautiful and ugly is clear. And it is not just shape, but sometimes combination of colors, the importance of having contrast in the image that you're inviting others to see, because without contrast, people do not see anything. And in my book, I have these examples pictorially, plus counter examples called illusions. And all of that is I think, very useful in education, especially for those who are aspiring to careers in design, not just engineering, but design in general. What I've said about scanning, let me make another connection. These eyes scanning the image is 100% applicable to human life on the surface of the earth. These tiny dots on the landscape are scanning the landscape. The city design emerges from natural tendency of every inhabitant to move on the area and not bump into the other inhabitants. In other words, unwittingly, the population finds itself building a street here and an intersection somewhere else, as opposed to building a pavement all over the area, not economical as that would be. You see here the so-called intangible, in this case, the attraction to beauty or usefulness is manifested physically through design that until my explanation was attributed to chance or seat of the pants or inheritance. That's the important step in physics, Luis. Physics, the biggest and only tent. Yeah, how is that? Adrian coming from engineering and proclaiming this supremacy of physics. Yeah.
Well, it's bold, but it's something that I definitely have sympathy for. The name of this channel is not a theory of everything by accident. This train of thought toward unification and the application of physics to everything that matters, I think, is something that is very important. And that brings me to the next couple of questions, because I see that our time is running short here. I really enjoyed your book, every aspect of it, and I highly encourage people to sit and read through it, because there's so many interesting ideas and interesting connections there. One of the most important, one of the most interesting to me is how you communicate the flow of energy or power through money and the banking system. Do you have a couple of minutes? Can you say something, a couple of minutes about this?
Sure.
And then the last question is, what does the science that you work on, what kind of light can it shed on what's happening in the conflict in Ukraine? So two big questions.
We'll get to them in that sequence. First, the movement of anything happens because that thing is pushed. The pushing comes from power. The power comes from flow architectures. We call them engines or power plants in human design, or animal design. Ingesting food, metabolism, and muscle action. These things are in fact thermodynamically the same thing. And so to summarize, there is a source of useful energy. This goes by several names depending on the layer of science that does the speaking. In engineering, we call it useful energy or exergy or available work. In chemistry, it's called free energy. There are some other such terms. The point is, it all comes originally from outer space, from the sun, as we speak, and renewable or fossil. Okay, so there's a source. There is a flow architecture, which is this engine or animal design, and then there's movement, and the movement is hierarchical, as we see. We have few big movers and a few small movers. You see it in the city, you see it on the highway, you see it everywhere, including the hierarchy of this university. All right. The so-called architecture known as bottom up or top down. You've heard of this expression. All right. At the same time, according to me, the same flow architecture, which is hierarchical, which is a hierarchy of the of movement, which is the consumption of fuel, is called the hierarchy of wealth. Turns out that the hierarchy of wealth is pretty much the same as the hierarchy of movement or fuel consumption. So, so movement is my way to discuss the physical reality. Others, obviously more imaginative, who back in the 1700s were not looking at anything like Adrian today, called it wealth. So wealth is hierarchical because it is another name for movement. And the movement comes from power that's produced by burning fuel. Okay, I'm coming to your question. Over time, civilization acquired, better knowledge, which meant better ways of producing power. Think about domesticated animals. Most recently, the power from burning fuels. At the time of the animal domestication, the movement, meaning the wealth, increased to such a high level, relatively speaking. I meant to mention agriculture as part of the same evolution or revolution. The production of power increased to the point where the producer, say the farmer, growing pigs or something, had produced much more than he could consume on the spot. And so that led to the phenomenon of trade. And of course, we know that the trade in kind was outcompeted by trade against an amount of money, which was a convention. And the money, then here we have money as an invention, represents power that could not be used on the spot. In other words, power that is put at the disposal of others who would use that power if they need. So this is how the invention of money, in the same little story, means the occurrence of banking. The invention of money becomes a way to spread over the entire landscape the power that was produced at one point, but it was too much that could not be consumed at that point. So now that power is distributed all over the landscape by those who borrow the money in order to put it to good use. And I made a drawing that looks like a chain reaction, which indicates that anybody who comes with a good idea, which ultimately one could show leads to producing more power per unit of fuel burned, any inventor is in fact setting the whole world in motion through this chain reaction. And this is why never mind the power plants, never mind the power plants, they're already a part of my argument. This is why every inventor, every maker of ideas is good for the whole world and worth knowing about, and much better why it is very important to teach young students to question what they see, what they hear, or also question their own thoughts that occur during the night and come up with ideas. That's right. That's the drawing.
Yeah, I'm sharing my screen now, and this is the drawing from Time and Beauty, no? Figure 10.1. And I thought this was a very interesting part of the book. And I just shared this for the listeners to get an idea what you're talking about. Of course, you go into detail in the book it's well worth mentioning. Can you quickly explain the drawing here?
Sure. Uh, all my drawings are to be read from left to right. So the original inventor with the contrivance, the engine that generates power by consuming fuel is on the left. It is the let's say the original mover, and however, this particular place on the left could not use all the power that it produced. Therefore, that power is lent by those black arrows that emanate to the right, and the black arrows are then used as power by the next movers, shown as more and smaller dots. And by the way,
And this is what you mean by hierarchical, right?
hierarchical, yes, hierarchical, and the mother of advancement on the whole territory. You see here that the one who benefits from the invention on the extreme left is everybody. Everybody was connected to this particular flow of power and then movement, and so that happens from left to right. In the reverse, and of course, guaranteeing the stability of the architecture is the fact that the mover produces power called wealth of his own, and with that, meaning with what the excess that every mover produces, the debt is paid back to the place where the black arrow was borrowed. So we have a counterflow of lending and repaying, which leads to this the stability of the architecture. But the architecture is one that spreads. It spreads, and as a consequence, Luis, the entire territory enjoys greater movement over time, which means greater wealth over time.
Greater freedom, no?
That too, and which means the observed tendency of all of us on the planet, starting with the troglodytes all the way to the highly advanced. They've all been getting to move more farther, more easily, and yes, more freely, and with greater wealth. If you look at the evolution of wealth in history, it has been upward, with very small glitches or blips that coincide with mayhem of the kind that we see today in Ukraine.
That would be a great point to ask you about the implications of your work for the situation in Ukraine. Can you comment on this?
Well, sadly, obviously, I'm extremely upset about it. I come from next door, from Romania. We are very familiar with these images. I grew up among the ruins from the war. I will not get into who did the bombing and all of that. You can read the history books. They came from the same tanks that are trying to destroy this civilized country called Ukraine. But the events of today are extremely important because they happen in a country that not long ago was part of the Soviet Empire. A lot of it is Russian speaking, and yes, Ukrainians would acknowledge that culturally they have a lot in common with Russian culture, but they're not only expressing their desire to have freedom, but they're actually fighting to the death to have freedom. So you see this march forward toward in direction that the previous drawing was sketching. It is innate in all of us. Well, some of course run away or flee or are chased away as refugees, but others stand their ground and fight for freedom. And in fact, all of Eastern Europe that used to be part of the Warsaw Pact became free pretty much overnight because of the latter. They stayed in place, and they insisted on democracy, freedom, as opposed to socialism. That was the big change. So the constructal law in the human realm, that is in the social organization, is in accord with, or is validated by the history of civilization, which has been, in spite of hiccups like those of today, evolution toward it has been an evolution toward more freedom. Absolutely, more freedom in ways that deserve to be acknowledged. Language liberated people, writing liberated people, science did that the big time. Those who had either of these things, language and the writing and science and art, became free compared with those who did not. You take whatever human construct, all the way to religion, that has the ability to improve itself and to morph itself, to adjust itself, is better for the society as a whole. Rigidity, on the other hand, has the opposite effect. And then, according to the constructal law, the former, the freely morphing, is destined to be observed in the future. The one that's rigid is not. And frankly, you haven't asked me, but what I can predict for the likes of Putin and those who support him is very, very sad. They will be swept away by this tendency of all humanity.
Very interesting. So the constructal law predicts a greater flow of energy, greater freedom. So we might be able to say that it predicts the ultimate survival of liberal democracy or something related to more freedom, compared to authoritarian rigidity, which is destined to not survive.
Well, two things. The first one, yes, the tendency will be toward these things that happen naturally. They don't come from above. You mentioned democracy. No, that just occurred to people without thinking, just like the city design. It was not imposed on them. Democracy is a very old let's call it tacit agreement between people in a living group. So that is natural. Same with the capitalism, by the way. I mentioned the money, the banking, and all that. These things happened. They were not invented by, say, a Hitler somewhere who then imposed it on people. So that is the natural flow architecture has always been the way of the future. All right. This other thing, you call it authoritarian. Now I would call it dictatorial. Is also part of this natural design, which is due to the fact, unfortunate fact, that in the hierarchies that emerge in any organization, sometimes at the very top, finds himself or herself an individual who happens to be, let's say, more single-minded, more narcissistic, more surrounded by yes men, and who, without, let's call it, who before everybody else notices, leads the group as if he or she knows better than anybody else.
Yes.
We've seen
Well,
this
that's-
tendency not only in Putin, but also in science. There are scientists who behave this way. There are journal editors who behave this way. There are entire academies that behave this way. The behavior is destined to be short-lived.
Okay, well, we'll end on what I see as a positive note, because if ultimately freedom and energy flow and we can be confident that it's going to survive in the end.
Luis, energy is not flowing, okay? That's language from physics. What flows is and moves is what you can see and draw. You cannot draw a picture of the said energy, okay? Energy, I call it power, is what comes out of the guts of this contrivance called the engine to move the thing that you can see and touch. All right. So the movement is that of bodies, or bodies of water, or bodies of air, and or for that matter, planets and all of that. Yes, and you can use concepts from physics such as energy to write a few simple equations and find yourself preaching to the choir. No, the science we're discussing, the so-called everything, is evolutionary design. It is everywhere. Every child can see it, and a few like us laughing from the top of this high balcony are going to tell first each other and then the rest that all of it is a very nice joke.
Okay, well, very nice, Professor. Thank you very much. You were nice enough to send me a copy of the book. Is it now available online? Is it available for sale? Has it been released?
Yes, the book is available. In fact, it was launched officially yesterday on Amazon, but it was available from the publisher for 2 or 3 weeks already. The pages are shiny and that's very good, because I have more than 70 illustrations. Half of them are in color, and several of them are about visual illusions, which deserve to be experienced as surprises by looking at a very well-made book. So
Yes.
that would be a hardcover.
Well, yes, there's so much in the book, and I wish we had more time to go into it. But like I said before, we could go on for a long time about this book. There's just so much in it. I sincerely appreciate your time, Professor Bejan. Thank you so much, and I look forward to talking again at some point in the future.
Of course, I'm very happy to be talking to you. Let me mention maybe a topic next time would be plagiarism, and why it is important to recognize and combat.
Yeah, we didn't get to that. Okay, very good. For next time. For now, thank you so much, Professor.
All the
Bye-bye.
best, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Likewise.